And yet, she looked at me again. That same smile. That same warmth. I wanted to run, to scream, to throw up the confusion and betrayal spinning inside me. But I stayed. Because part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe this wedding didn't mean what I thought it did. But deep down, I knew. Something was off. Something she wasn't telling me. I shifted my weight, pretending to adjust my jacket, pretending to be calm. But my hands betrayed me, trembling slightly as I gripped the lapels. I realized then that the real nightmare wasn't that she was marrying someone else. It was that I had no idea who she really was anymore. And maybe, I never would. I didn't expect to feel this way walking into a wedding. I mean, I'd been there for friends before, seen people start new lives, but this felt different. From the moment I stepped onto the garden path, all I could see was her. She was standing at the altar, sunlight catching her hair, that same familiar smile she'd given me 100 times over the years. Only now, it wasn't for me. I froze, like I'd been caught mid-step in a snowstorm. My hands went cold, and I felt that weird hollow panic in my chest, the one that hits when your brain knows something your heart refuses to accept. She turned her head, caught my eyes, and waved. That smile. It was warm, effortless, the kind that made me feel at home. Except I wasn't home. Not here, not in this moment. I wanted to call her out, to ask how this happened, to demand to know why I didn't even know the name of the man she was about to marry. But instead, I took a shaky breath and stepped closer, pretending like I belonged. My eyes couldn't leave her, watching her laugh with him, the way her hand rested lightly in his. Every small gesture felt like it was designed to punch me in the gut. I caught myself staring a little too long at her ring, that shiny, perfect circle that now marked someone else as her future. There was a sudden swirl of voices around me, the officiant, the guests, the soft clink of glasses, but it all felt distant. I was trapped in this strange limbo, where I could see everything and yet understand nothing. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been thinking we were? I don't even know what, if not this. My mind started replaying memories, every smile, every late-night conversation, every time she'd said she cared. And I couldn't shake the growing, sinking feeling that some of it had been staged. As I stood there, pretending to be just another guest, my mind started pulling me backward, dragging me through years I wasn't ready to visit. I remembered the first time we met, not at a party or some random encounter, but in a quiet bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of a worn-out poetry collection. She had laughed, that soft, melodic laugh that made you forget your own name, and offered me the book. I still remember the way her fingers brushed mine, innocent, but electric. From that moment, everything seemed easy. We talked for hours about nothing, but it felt like everything. I remember the late-night drives where we'd talk about the future, the stupid jokes we shared that made strangers glance at us like we were lunatics. And the quiet moments when words weren't needed. There was a closeness there that I thought was unshakable, the kind you see in movies but never expect to live. I remembered the time I stayed up all night making her a playlist, sneaking little notes into her bag. She found them the next day, eyes sparkling, and told me I was ridiculous, but in a way that made me feel like I mattered. And the first time she cried on my shoulder after a bad day, her shoulders shaking against mine, I swore I'd protect her from everything. Protect her from anyone else, from the world, from herself. And now, standing here, watching her exchange vows with someone else, all those memories felt like ghosts. Memories I could touch but couldn't hold. I tried to tell myself that maybe we'd grown apart, that maybe life just happens. But it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate, like I'd been left in the waiting room of a life she had quietly moved on from. Even the smallest details came back to me, the way she used to curl her hair when she was nervous, the faint perfume she wore that somehow lingered in my memory long after she left the room, the way she'd scrunch her nose when she laughed at something stupid I said. All of it, every little thing, now hit me like a reminder that I'd known her in a way no one else ever would. And yet, here I was, a stranger at her wedding. I caught myself looking at the way her hand rested on his, the way she leaned into him just slightly, and I felt a pang that I couldn't name. Jealousy. Betrayal. Sadness. Probably all of it at once. But even in that moment, I couldn't help thinking about all the times she'd leaned into me like that, all the times I'd thought we were untouchable. And I realized, I had no idea if any of it had been real, or if I had just been blind to the truth. After the memories faded, my mind started picking through the months leading up to this day, trying to understand when things had started slipping. I remembered the first few times I noticed her pulling away, not dramatically, just subtly. Little excuses she made, the way she'd glance at her phone a little too quickly, or suddenly need to run an errand when we were supposed to hang out. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was busy, stressed, tired. I wanted to believe that, because the alternative terrified me. There were dinners where she'd sit across from me, scrolling her phone silently, her smiles polite but distant. I'd try to ask what was wrong. And she'd brush it off with a soft, "Nothing, don't worry about it," the kind of answer that makes you want to demand the truth but also feel guilty for asking. I remember lying awake at night, replaying every conversation, wondering if I'd done something to push her away. Every laugh that didn't reach her eyes, every casual touch that lingered less than it used to. It all felt like tiny cracks forming in something I thought was unbreakable. I even caught myself trying to rationalize it, blaming myself for being too clingy, too busy, too whatever I wasn't. And the more I tried to explain it away, the more I started noticing patterns. She'd disappear for hours without telling me where she was going. Come back with a smile that felt rehearsed, and I'd force myself to believe in it. Because I didn't want to admit that maybe she didn't feel the same way I did anymore. And yet, even in that distance, she'd still make those small gestures, the way she'd laugh at my dumb jokes just long enough to let me think I mattered, the way she'd glance at me across the room with that faint spark of warmth that made me hold on, made me believe we could fix whatever this was. Those moments were like cracks of sunlight in a stormy sky. But the cracks didn't make the storm disappear, they just made the waiting worse. I can't tell you how many nights I sat there, scrolling through old texts, thinking about things I wish I'd said, things I wish I'd done differently. And the worst part? I couldn't pinpoint a single moment where it went wrong. It wasn't a fight, or a betrayal I could see. It was a slow, creeping distance that left me standing at her wedding feeling like a stranger in her life. And deep down, I knew, whatever happened back then, I'd missed the signs. By the time the ceremony started again, I realized I wasn't just sad anymore. There was a sharp, gnawing edge to my thoughts. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it even if I didn't yet understand why. Something had been hidden from me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But I also couldn't look away. I started noticing things that didn't make sense, small, almost insignificant moments at first, but they kept piling up in my head like stones in a bag. There was the time she mentioned meeting a friend for lunch, but when I asked who, she hesitated for a split second, just a flicker, like she hadn't meant to admit it. I brushed it off. I wanted to. I kept telling myself I was overthinking. Then there were the texts she would write, or so I noticed, quickly typing and putting her phone down when I walked into the room. Not secretive like cheating, I told myself. Just private. But the way her thumb hovered over the screen, her eyes darting away, it made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't paranoia, at least I tried to tell myself. It was the gut instinct you get when something is quietly wrong. Even during our last weekend together before I realized this wedding was real, she kept glancing at the clock, as if watching time, as if counting down. I asked her what was on her mind, and she laughed it off, distracted me with a joke, the kind that made me smile while my heart felt heavier with questions I wasn't ready to ask. There were other moments too, her sudden laughter over a text, her vague stories of late nights that didn't quite add up. Nothing concrete, nothing I could prove. Just this gnawing sense that something was happening behind my back, something I wasn't supposed to know. I started replaying the small signs I'd ignored for months, the unexplained absences, the way she sometimes looked through me like she was elsewhere, the way her eyes would soften when she thought I wasn't watching. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that my insecurities were twisting reality. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she had another side, one I wasn't supposed to see, one that was quietly separate from the us I thought I knew, and it wasn't just behavior. It was the little things she left behind, the half-read books, the coffee cups, the scent she left in the air. Normally, I would have laughed at myself, missing these tiny clues, but now they felt like breadcrumbs leading somewhere I didn't want to go. Somewhere I feared I was about to discover the truth. By the time the first toast started, I realized the unease had built into something I could no longer ignore. I didn't know what was happening, but I could feel the undercurrent of deceit, subtle but undeniable. Something was off. Something I had missed, something I wasn't supposed to see. And I had a sinking feeling that this night would unravel everything I thought I knew about her. About us. By this point, I couldn't tell what I was feeling anymore. Part of me was angry, burning, hot, furious at the thought that she could be here, smiling at someone else while I stood frozen, a spectator to her life. And yet, another part of me was still in love, still aching at the thought that maybe I had imagined everything wrong, that the warmth I remembered from her wasn't a lie. I hated that I still cared. I hated that seeing her laugh, even with him, made my chest tighten in a way that felt like longing. I caught myself analyzing every tiny gesture, how she brushed her hair behind her ear, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the casual touch on his arm, and feeling a stab of jealousy that I couldn't put into words. But even that jealousy was mixed with guilt. Who was I to feel this way? She was getting married. She had chosen this path. And yet, my mind kept circling back to all the moments we had shared, the nights we spent talking about the future, and I couldn't shake the sense that part of her heart had still been with me. I remember looking at her for what felt like hours, trying to read her expression, searching for any hint of doubt, any flash of hesitation, anything that might tell me she had second thoughts. And then it hit me, maybe that's why my chest felt so heavy. Not just because of what she was doing, but because I was still holding on to something that she had quietly let go of. Or maybe something she had never let go of. I could feel the sweat starting to bead at my temples, my hands clenching and unclenching as I tried to stay composed. I wanted to walk up to her, grab her hand, demand answers, but I also wanted to turn around and leave, disappear into the crowd where I couldn't see her with him. The push and pull inside me was dizzying, a storm I couldn't control, and yet, I stayed. Part of me wanted to watch, to see this wedding through, as if observing would give me clarity. But all I got was confusion, a quiet rage, and the sinking realization that love didn't always make sense, and sometimes, it hurt in ways you couldn't prepare for. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it lingering in the corners of my mind. Teasing me, daring me to notice it. But I still didn't know what it was. By the end of the night, the speeches, the toasts, the laughter, all of it blended into a haze. I felt trapped between hope and heartbreak, suspicion and disbelief. And as I watched her lean in closer to him, my stomach twisted, because I knew, whatever this was, whatever I thought I knew about us, it was about to be challenged in ways I wasn't ready to face. It happened during the cake cutting. I was standing off to the side, nursing a drink I didn't even want, watching her laugh at something he said, when I noticed the way she leaned toward him, and then, just for a split second, she glanced my way. Not a casual glance. Something sharper. A flash of recognition, of guilt, maybe. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever it was, it set my chest pounding in a way I hadn't felt before. Later, as guests swirled around us, I saw her step away under the pretense of checking on a cousin. From across the room, I caught her fingers brushing against the back of her dress as she straightened it, but there was something odd. She seemed tense. Like she was rehearsing a smile she didn't want to give. And then I noticed him, her husband-to-be, was talking to someone else, completely oblivious, leaving a tiny sliver of space between them. That's when I saw it. A gesture, subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable, the kind of touch she reserved for me, for those nights when we thought no one was watching. My stomach dropped. I wanted to deny it, tell myself I was imagining things. But the memory of her hand in mine during those quiet nights, the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder, made the gesture impossible to misread. And the thought that she might still be holding on to something, for me, even as she married him, hit me like a wave. Confusion, disbelief, and a strange, bitter thrill all mixed together in my chest. I tried to act normal, but my mind raced. Why would she do that now? Was it an accident, a habit, or something deliberate? And if it was deliberate, what did it mean? For the first time that night, the tiny cracks I'd felt for months started to widen into a canyon. Something was being hidden from me, and I was starting to see the first real evidence. I spent the rest of the evening half watching her, half imagining every possible scenario in my head. Each smile, each glance, each small, intimate motion that didn't belong to the public eye, the little things she did when she thought no one was paying attention, started to feel like breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. But couldn't resist. By the end of the night, I realized the wedding itself had become a mask. Behind the vows, the laughter, the speeches, there was something else simmering, something I hadn't caught before, something I might not survive discovering. And deep down, I knew that the real truth was waiting somewhere between the smiles, the gestures, and the shadows she cast. I just didn't know how close I was to finding it. I thought about confronting her more than once that night. Every time I caught her glance, felt the brush of familiarity in her gestures, or noticed the way she laughed at something I knew only we'd ever joke about, my fists clenched, and my heart raced. I wanted to grab her, demand answers, yell until the truth came out. But I didn't. I couldn't. There's something paralyzing about standing on the outside of a life you thought you shared. I watched her across the room, talking to him, leaning in just slightly, whispering something in his ear. My mind screamed at me, say something, do something, you can't just stand there. But the moment I imagined opening my mouth, I felt a strange hesitation. A fear that whatever I said might ruin the last shred of dignity I had, or worse. Expose a truth I wasn't ready to handle, so I stayed quiet. I sipped my drink, pretending to laugh at someone else's joke, forcing myself to nod at the conversations around me, while my thoughts circled like vultures. I kept analyzing every detail, the way her hands moved, the subtle tilt of her head when she listened to him, the way she leaned just enough to suggest closeness, but not the kind of closeness she had once reserved for me. It was infuriating, confusing, and heartbreaking all at once. And then, as if the night wanted to punish me further, I caught her looking at me again. That faint, almost imperceptible flash in her eyes, it wasn't quite recognition, and it wasn't entirely warmth. It was something else. Something I couldn't read. A secret hiding behind familiarity, a hesitation I wasn't meant to see. And my chest tightened in that familiar, sick way, because I realized that even if I confronted her, even if I demanded the truth, I might not be prepared for the answer, so I didn't. I walked past her quietly, made a joke to someone else, laughed when I didn't feel like it, and forced myself to be part of the crowd. But underneath the surface, my mind was racing. Every small interaction, every brush of her sleeve against his arm, every glance she stole in my direction, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. By the end of the night, I was exhausted in a way that wasn't just physical. My head was spinning, my chest ached, and my stomach felt like lead. I knew one thing for certain, something was being hidden from me. Something I had ignored, dismissed, or hadn't wanted to see. And the longer I stayed silent, the closer I felt to discovering a truth I wasn't sure I could handle. I finally saw it, everything I had been avoiding, everything my gut had been whispering for months. It wasn't just small gestures or fleeting glances. She was still seeing me. Even now, even as she stood at the altar, exchanging vows, pretending to build a life with him, part of her heart still belonged to me. I caught her later, slipping out under the pretense of taking a phone call. I followed at a distance, heart pounding so loudly I thought he might hear it across the room. And there she was, leaning against the far wall, her hand brushing mine in a way I recognized instantly. That familiar warmth, that quiet intimacy we had shared, it hadn't gone anywhere. Only now, it felt like a betrayal sharp enough to split me in two. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to demand, how could you? How could you do this to me? But the words caught in my throat. Because part of me already knew the answer. She had chosen both of us, in her own way. She had married him, yes, but she had never fully let go of me. And the realization made my chest tighten in a way I didn't think was possible. Anger, heartbreak, jealousy, and longing all collided, leaving me trembling and nauseous. Every memory, every late-night conversation, every secret we had shared, it was all intertwined with this impossible reality. And yet, even as I felt my world collapse, I couldn't hate her completely. I couldn't ignore the fact that somewhere in her mind, in her heart, she had tried to hold on to both. That quiet manipulation, that hidden affection, it wasn't malicious entirely, it was messy, human, cruelly complicated. I stepped back, hiding in the shadows, watching her return to him with that same rehearsed smile, the same laugh, the same eyes that had once only been mine. And in that moment, I realized I had been standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing I was about to fall, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The person I thought I knew, the one I thought I had shared my life with, had been living two lives simultaneously. And the betrayal, the quiet, unimaginable betrayal, was worse than anything I could have imagined. I don't think I've ever felt so shattered and so aware of every detail at the same time. Her presence, her movements, her voice, it all felt like knives and honey at once. And as I finally walked away, heart bleeding and chest tight, I knew I'd never be able to look at her, or anyone, without carrying the weight of this impossible, quiet truth. I left the wedding without saying a word. I didn't want to scream, didn't want to beg, didn't want her explanations, because deep down, I knew there wouldn't be one that could fix this. The drive home felt endless. Every red light, every quiet stretch of road, seemed to echo the thoughts spinning in my head. I kept replaying the night, her gestures, the way she had touched me in secret while standing next to him. My chest felt heavy, my hands shaking on the wheel. At home, I couldn't even sit still. I wandered through my apartment, picking up objects, setting them down again, trying to distract myself, to make sense of what I had just seen. But there was no sense to be made. How do you make sense of someone loving you and betraying you at the same time? How do you reconcile memories that feel sacred with a truth that feels like a knife twisting in your chest? I thought about calling her, demanding the truth, even though I already knew it. I imagined the words I'd say, the confrontations I'd have. And then I realized, I didn't want to speak to her. Not tonight. Not ever, maybe. Because hearing her voice, hearing her try to justify the impossible, it would only break me further. And somehow, staying silent felt like the only thing I could do to survive. Sleep didn't come. I kept turning the scenes over in my head, dissecting every glance, every laugh, every secret touch. The more I thought, the angrier I got, but it wasn't just anger at her. It was at myself, for missing the signs, for trusting blindly, for thinking that love alone could protect me from heartbreak. There was no villain here, not really. Just two people making choices that left someone else in pieces. And the worst part? I was that someone. By morning, I felt hollow, drained, and yet strangely awake. Something in me had shifted. The person I thought I knew, the life I thought I had shared, had vanished in one night. And though I wanted closure, wanted answers, I also realized that some truths aren't meant to be fixed, they're meant to be carried. Quietly, painfully, as lessons you never forget, and now, I find myself stuck in this strange limbo. Part of me wants to reach out, to demand justice, to reclaim some shred of what I thought was mine. But another part of me knows that even if I did, it wouldn't change the betrayal, the quiet manipulation, or the fact that she had chosen to live two lives at once. And somehow, that knowledge is heavier than anything else I've ever carried. I don't know what I should do next. Part of me wants to call her, demand answers, confront her about everything, every secret, every touch, every moment she kept from me while marrying someone else. I want to scream, to shake her, to hear her voice admit what I already know in my gut. But another part of me. Another part just wants to disappear, to erase her from my life entirely, to pretend I never saw anything and start over. I keep imagining both choices. Confrontation would be messy. I'd probably leave feeling emptier than I do now, carrying more questions than answers. Silence would feel safe at first, but I know it would gnaw at me forever, like a shadow of what could have been. And what right do I even have to demand anything? She made her choice. She married him. Yet somewhere in her heart, she never stopped seeing me. That's the part that twists my stomach into knots, the part one can't reconcile with logic, or with the memories I thought were ours alone. I replay her gestures, the subtle ways she had tried to keep me close even while living a life with him. Were they proof of love? Or proof of manipulation? I don't know if it's one, the other, or both. And the more I think about it, the less certain I am of myself. Am I overreacting? Am I justified in feeling betrayed? Or am I holding on to something that never truly belonged to me? I've spent nights staring at the ceiling, thinking about how I could face her, or avoid her, forever. And still, every memory, every laugh, every shared secret keeps tugging me back, refusing to let go. I don't know if I can forgive her, or if I can forgive myself for ever believing in us completely.